Okay, let's unpack this. Today we're diving deep into a topic that, honestly, when I first heard the title, it sounded completely counterintuitive, maybe even a little shocking.
Hmm.
We're talking about the philosophy of die with zero, a compelling idea from author Bill Perkins.
Right.
Now, your immediate reaction might be, wait, zero? Does that mean reckless spending, ending up, broke?
Yeah, that's the common first thought, definitely.
And that's exactly the skepticism we need to tackle head on.
Yeah.
Because at its core, this isn't about financial recklessness at all.
Not really, no.
It's about optimizing your life itself, maximizing fulfillment, minimizing waste
Yeah.
by intentionally deploying your most precious resource,
Yeah.
your life energy.
What's truly fascinating here, I think, is that the author, Bill Perkins, he isn't your typical certified financial planner or, a family investment advisor. He comes from a very different world.
Right, engineer, energy trader.
Exactly. He's an engineer by training, a hugely successful energy trader who made his fortune through really rigorous analytical skills.
So a numbers guy, but
Yeah.
applying it to life optimization.
Precisely. That background gives him a unique lens, right? He looks at life and money analytically. His perspective comes from this desire to live his life to the fullest, and he wants to help others do the same.
But only if they have the means, the resources.
Well, yes, but it's not just money.
Mhm.
Critically, it's also health and free time, having enough of those to make real deliberate choices about how you use them.
Okay.
He basically treats life as an engineering problem. How do you optimize for maximum experience points, as he calls them?
And his own journey towards this idea is rooted in some really poignant, very specific experiences that really hit home.
Yeah, he shares a story about a friend from childhood, Erin. She and her husband, John, they faced an extreme, just devastating situation.
John's diagnosis.
Yes, John was diagnosed with advanced clear cell sarcoma. It was an aggressive, rare form of cancer, and the prognosis was grim. They were told maybe 3 months.
Wow, 3 months. That's brutal.
It's a stark, brutal reality. And it forced Erin to confront this monumental, immediate decision about her life, her job.
What to do with that incredibly limited time?
That's right. With John facing such a short, defined period, Erin's immediate instinct was, I need to quit my job.
Did Perkins advise her on that?
He recounts telling her, Erin, please stop what you're doing, spend time as a family while John still can. He even offered financial help to ease the burden.
That's generous.
But she was already thinking along those lines. She'd been contemplating it, prioritizing what truly mattered in those final moments. It was a choice born of an impossible situation, but one she felt she absolutely had to make.
And she did it. She quit.
She did, made the tough decision. So between John's brutal cancer treatments in Iowa, they focused really intently on just simple, precious pleasures.
Like what? What kind of things?
Visiting their local park, watching movies together, curled up on the couch, playing video games as a family, picking the kids up from school, just being together.
Cherishing the everyday stuff.
Exactly. And when the local doctors ran out of options, they traveled to Boston for an experimental clinical trial. But they used those trips not just for John's treatment. They deliberately used them as opportunities to explore. They went on historic tours of the city, savoring those moments, knowing how precious they were, especially while John could still walk and enjoy them.
Every moment magnified.
Totally. It's heartbreakingly specific, isn't it? John, at one point, apparently just broke down, overwhelmed by everything he knew he was going to miss, watching his kids grow up, spending years with Erin.
Oh, man.
He died in January 2009, tragically, just 3 months after that initial diagnosis.
Just like they predicted.
Yeah. And Erin, looking back, describes it as, filled with trauma and devastation or raw, painful memory.
Of course.
Yet she explicitly says she was glad she quit her job to be home with him, to truly be present.
No regrets about that specific choice, despite the pain.
Exactly. If she hadn't, that specific regret, that missed opportunity for connection, would likely have just compounded over the years. It might have become an even heavier burden than the trauma itself.
So while their story is extreme, this rare cancer, death, right there, the core challenge it highlights is, universal, isn't it?
Absolutely. Everyone's health eventually declines, and sooner or later, we all die.
It's the ultimate deadline.
Right. So the fundamental question for every single one of us, whatever our situation is, how do we make the absolute most of our finite, precious time on Earth? How do we maximize the life we actually have?
And is this just philosophy? Or something more practical?
Well, that raises an important point. Is this just some, philosophical musing? Perkins, with his engineer's brain, doesn't see it that way. Not at all.
So how does he see it?
For him, it's a detailed optimization problem. It's about maximizing your lifetime fulfillment while simultaneously minimizing waste.
Waste of money, waste of time.
Waste of money left unspent, waste of time spent earning it, waste of experiences you didn't have. It's about allocating your life energy as effectively as possible before your time runs out.
Every decision becomes a kind of calculation then, an opportunity cost.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
A calculation of opportunity cost. And this die with zero philosophy, it directly challenges so much of what we've been taught about saving, about accumulating wealth.
Yeah, it forces us to rethink what it truly means to be financially smart or even, successful.
Definitely. Bill Perkins himself had this powerful revelation early in his career that really set him on this counterintuitive path.
What happened?
Well, he recounts starting out on Wall Street in the early 1990s. He was a screen clerk at the New York Mercantile Exchange.
A screen clerk. What's that?
It was essentially the finance industry's equivalent of the mailroom, basically a starting point. And his starting salary was, get this, $16,000 a year.
$16,000.
In New York City.
Wow.
Yeah. He had to move back home with his mom in Orange, New Jersey. Even after a promotion to head screen clerk and a bump to $18,000, he could only afford to share this tiny studio apartment on Manhattan's Upper West Side.
How tiny.
They put up a makeshift wall, giving him this quasi-bedroom that, as he vividly describes it, was roughly the size of a pizza oven.
A pizza oven. I can almost feel how cramped that must have been. Talk about thrifty.
Incredibly thrifty, he had to be. He talks about having so little cash that if he didn't buy a monthly subway pass, he was literally busted because he couldn't afford the daily fare.
Seriously?
Seriously. He'd actually sweat bullets if a date ordered popcorn at the movies.
No way. Popcorn anxiety.
Yep. He even compares his own extreme frugality to his friend Tony, who would meticulously scrounge up unpopped kernels from a bowl of popcorn, refrigerate them, and reuse them later, hoping they'd pop.
Okay, that's next level thrift.
He was actually proud of this, almost obsessive thriftiness at the time.
Until something changed his mind.
Until the pivotal moment. He was boasting about his hard-won savings, about $1,000 to his boss, Joe Farrell, a partner at the firm.
Expecting praise, maybe?
Totally. He expected admiration, maybe a pat on the back for being so responsible on such a low income. But Joe's response was legendary. A slap across the face, Perkins calls it.
What did he say?
Joe just looked at him and said, "Are you a fing idiot to save that money?"
Are you a fing idiot? Whoa. That's direct. Why? What was the logic?
Joe's point was blunt. You came here to make millions. Your earning power is going to happen. Do you think you'll only make $18,000 a year for the rest of your life?
Okay. Perspective.
Exactly. Perkins realized Joe was absolutely right. He hadn't taken a Wall Street job to stay at that income level forever. He would almost certainly earn significantly more in the future.
So why hoard the little he had now?
Right. Why was he saving this random percentage of his tiny income now when that $1,000 could have bought him meaningful experiences he could enjoy immediately? He should have been enjoying that measly $1,000 right then when its utility, its value to him, was actually highest.
And that flipped a switch for him.
He says it was a life-changing moment. It truly cracked his head open to new ideas about balancing earning and spending, challenging all his ingrained habits.
He later connected this to a financial concept, right?
Yeah, he later understood this was related to an old financial idea called consumption smoothing.
Consumption smoothing. How does that usually work?
Typically, it means evening out your spending over your lifetime. You shift money from your richer years, maybe your peak earning years, to your leaner years, like early career or retirement, to ensure a consistent lifestyle.
Makes sense. Save when you have more, spend it when you have less.
But Perkins realized he was doing the opposite. He was effectively taking money away from his starving younger self when he actually had the health, vitality, and time to enjoy simple pleasures, to give to his future, wealthier self.
A future self who might not need it as much or even be able to enjoy it the same way.
Exactly. As we'll explore, that future self might have different needs and definitely different capabilities.
It's a common trap, though, isn't it? Driven by habit or fear.
For sure. And around the same time, he came across Your Money or Your Life by Vicki Robbins and Joe Dominguez.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic. Big in the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early.
Right. And that book profoundly transformed his understanding of the true value of his time, his life energy. It made him realize he was maybe wasting valuable hours chasing the wrong thing.
What specific ideas from that book really stuck with him, connecting to this die with zero idea?
A key concept was life energy. It really highlighted how a seemingly higher salary doesn't always mean more actual income per hour once you factor in all the hidden costs associated with earning it.
Right, the true cost of the job.
Exactly. He gives this compelling example. Someone earning, say, $40,000 a year might actually be making more per hour of their actual free usable time than someone earning $70,000 a year.
That sounds backwards to most people. How does that math work? What are those hidden costs?
Well, it comes down to those insidious, often overlooked costs. The $70 pay job might demand a much longer commute, more time, more transport costs, maybe car wear and tear.
Okay.
It might implicitly require a more expensive wardrobe or a certain professional image that costs money.
Keeping up appearances.
Right. And crucially, it often demands more actual hours in the office, taking work home, being on call mentally.
So you calculate your real hourly wage.
Exactly. When you factor in all of that life energy spent, the time, the money spent just supporting the job, the increased stress the person with the higher salary can actually end up poorer in terms of net income per hour.
And, more importantly, have less time and energy left over to actually enjoy the money they earn.
Precisely. It's a really detailed calculation of your true hourly wage, what you're really trading your life for.
So it's about being incredibly deliberate, quantifying the trade-offs and everything. He uses that cookie analogy, right?
Yeah, the cookie analogy is great. Converting it into time on the treadmill. If a cookie looks good, he'll take a bite, then immediately ask himself, is eating this cookie worth walking an extra hour on the treadmill?
Does he always say no?
He notes the answer isn't always no, but it's never a thoughtless decision. This kind of disciplined calculation forces a conscious choice.
It applies to money and time, too, not just food and exercise.
Absolutely. It makes those decisions more deliberate and better aligned with his overall goals. It strips away the automatic yes or the mindless habit.
And this deliberate approach, it leads directly into questioning the whole goal of just endless wealth accumulation, doesn't it?
It really does, especially when that accumulation goes way beyond what anyone could reasonably spend in a lifetime. Perkins points to figures like Bill Gates.
What's his take on Gates?
He argues that even Gates, despite his later huge philanthropic efforts, accumulated several times what he could spend in one lifetime. Perkins thinks Gates maybe should have retired from paying work sooner.
To deploy that wealth earlier, for good or for personal enjoyment.
Exactly. Get it working much earlier. He has that great analogy for it, too.
The Space Invaders one.
Yeah. Life is not a game of Space Invaders. You don't get points for all the money you rack up in the game.
That's good. Yet, so many people treat it exactly like that, right? Just earning and earning, maximizing wealth without thinking about maximizing life.
Or maximizing what they could give away now when it could have a huge impact.
He gives another example, someone he knew personally, John Arnold.
Yes, John Arnold, known as the king of natural gas for his incredible returns. He started a hedge fund, Centaurus, with the explicit goal of making enough money to then just enjoy life.
Did he have a specific number in mind?
He did. He told Perkins very directly, once I make $15 million, if I'm still trading, punch me in the face.
15 million. That's a strong statement. So, did Perkins have to punch him? Did he stop?
He did not. Perkins never had to lay a glove on him. Arnold was just so brilliant on such a winning streak that the target kept moving.
Ah, the classic goalpost shift.
Totally. $15 million became $25 million, then $100 million. By 2010, his charitable foundation alone had assets of $711 million.
Wow.
He kept working, even though he didn't seem to love the job itself anymore. When he finally quit in 2012, at age 38, he'd amassed over $4 billion.
$4 billion. So he definitely solved the wealth problem, but maybe created a different one. The Brewster's Millions problem.
Exactly. That's a great reference. The fictional problem of having too much money and finding it incredibly difficult to spend it all meaningfully or quickly.
So Arnold had trouble spending it, even with billions.
Apparently so. He already lives in a magnificent house, could do pretty much whatever he wanted. But he couldn't, say, have Maroon 5 play private concerts in his backyard every Saturday because he didn't want to spoil his kids.
Ah, so life choices, like having kids, inherently limit spending regardless of wealth.
Right. And while Arnold argued that quitting earlier wouldn't have led to $4 billion, enabling a much bigger social impact later, Perkins contends he worked past the point of the optimal utility of that money.
The point where each extra dollar wasn't really adding much to his life or potential impact anymore.
Exactly. Whether that specific point was $2 billion or $1.5 billion, Perkins argues it was certainly well before $4 billion. The marginal utility of each additional dollar had plummeted.
It sounds less like strategy and more like habit, addiction almost.
That's precisely what Perkins calls it, an addictive habit of working for money even when it's no longer for enjoyment or even necessity.
Like a smoker who keeps smoking long after the reason they started is gone.
Exactly that comparison. For many, he says, the thrill of making money exceeds the thrill of actually living.
That's a powerful, maybe uncomfortable thought.
It is. And Perkins emphasizes, no matter who you are, captain of industry or everyday worker, if you spend hours of your life acquiring money and then die without spending all of it, you've needlessly wasted precious hours.
There's no getting those hours back.
None. Every dollar unspent represents a segment of your life, energy, your time that was unnecessarily expended. You worked for free, essentially.
He makes it really stark with specific figures too, doesn't he?
Super clear. $1 million left, that's $1 million of experiences you didn't have. And if you die with $50,000 left, well, that's $50,000 of experiences you didn't have.
It's a direct equation. Unspent money equals lost life, lost experiences. Just not optimal.
Right. And to make this even more concrete, he uses the detailed example of Elizabeth. She's a fictitious 45-year-old single woman earning $60K a year in Austin.
Okay, tell me about Elizabeth.
After taxes, her net income is about $49,000. She works a demanding 50 hours a week, so her net income is roughly $19.56 per hour.
She sounds disciplined, though.
Very. Paid off student loans, owns her house outright valued at $450,000. Last year, she spent about $33,000 on living expenses and diligently saved the remaining $16,000.
Saving a good chunk. What's her goal?
Her dream is to retire in 20 years. She's contributing significantly to her 401k and other savings.
So on paper, Elizabeth sounds like a model saver, someone many financial advisors would probably praise.
Exactly. She looks like she's doing everything right according to conventional wisdom.
But how does that stack up for her retirement based on Perkins' philosophy? What's the projection?
Well, she keeps saving $16,000 a year, plus conservative investment growth. Her retirement fund is projected to hit about $770,000.
That sounds pretty good.
It does, and that amount is calculated to last her 25 years in retirement, spending about $32,000 a year, which is actually slightly less than she spends now while working.
So she saves all this money to live on less later.
That's the crucial, almost unsettling insight from this detailed example. Elizabeth is essentially working extra hours now for free, for money her future self may never actually get to spend or enjoy.
She's sacrificing current experiences, travel, hobbies, time with people.
Potentially, yes. All to accumulate a sum that her future self might not fully utilize or even need, especially given how spending tends to decrease later in life.
It highlights that common pattern of oversaving for a future self that might not be able to enjoy it.
Exactly. Effectively wasting the most vibrant, capable years of her life working for wealth she won't fully benefit from. It's a kind of tragedy of misplaced priorities, often driven by societal pressure or just fear.
This detailed analysis really shifts the focus, doesn't it? Away from just piling up money towards actively maximizing life experiences.
Completely.
It makes you wonder, if we're not supposed to just hoard money, what should we be investing in? What's the real currency of a well-lived life, according to this?
The book's answer is really clear. Experiences.
Not things.
Not primarily things. Psychological studies consistently show spending money on experiences makes us happier than spending on material possessions.
Why is that?
Well, unlike physical objects, which often depreciate the minute you buy them, experiences actually tend to gain in value over time.
How do they gain value?
They pay what Perkins calls a memory dividend. It's an ongoing, compounding return on your initial investment of time and money.
The memory dividend.
Yeah.
I like that phrase. It really captures why experiences feel so valuable long-term. Can you elaborate on how that works? Why is it so critical?
Sure. The memory dividend is a really powerful idea. Experiences, unlike stuff, get better over time in a way. Each time you recall a great moment, a great trip, a great connection.
Or share the story with someone.
Right. You're not just reliving it, you're compounding its joy. It's like getting an emotional interest payment. Think about how our brains work. We don't start fresh every day. We carry this huge network of memories.
Like knowing what a door is without thinking about it.
Exactly. That instant recognition is a small, quiet dividend from past experiences. Or seeing a loved one making coffee All that shared history floods in and enhances the present moment. That's memory dividends at work constantly.
So it's about the ongoing mental and emotional replay value.
Precisely. When you have an experience, say, a fantastic trip or a memorable concert, you get the joy in the moment, obviously. But crucially, you also form memories you get to relive later.
Triggered by a song, a smell, a photo.
Yeah, exactly. And each time you remember that original experience, you get an additional little hit of enjoyment from mentally and emotionally reliving it.
These small joys add up.
They really do. These repeated small joys accumulate and profoundly shape who you are, creating this rich internal landscape. It's why people instinctively grab photo albums in a fire, right? Stuff can be replaced, but memories, the fabric of our identity, are priceless.
And it feels like tech companies have totally figured this out. They know how valuable our memories are to us.
Oh, absolutely. Companies like Facebook, Google Photos, they've built entire features like the "on this day X years ago" thing, specifically to capitalize on this.
Monetizing the memory dividend.
Exactly. By algorithmically surfacing old photos and videos, they tap directly into your memory dividend, sparking good feelings, keeping you engaged, building loyalty. Before tech, friends and family did this organically, the whole "remember when."
Now, algorithms do it.
Yeah, technology's taken on that role, cashing in on the powerful inherent value of memory. They've found a way to monetize our mental replays.
But the real power is when you cash in on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not financially, but for your own life fulfillment.
Mm-hmm.
How does the book suggest we quantify this memory dividend for ourselves?
Perkins uses this clever analogy of experience points. Imagine the original experience gets a certain number of points, represented as, say, a vertical bar showing its initial enjoyment.
Okay.
Because of the memory dividend, every time you recall that experience, you get an additional little bar of points.
Stacking up over time.
Right. If you stack all those little bars, representing the ongoing memory dividends over your lifetime, you can, theoretically, get a second bar that's as tall as the original experience bar, or sometimes even taller.
Taller. How can the memories be worth more than the original event? That sounds like exponential growth.
Through compounding. Similar to how money grows, but with human connection added in.
How does that work?
When you share the memory of an experience with others, a spouse, a friend, your kids, it creates a new experience in itself. You're communicating, laughing, bonding, giving advice, being vulnerable.
The act of sharing enhances it.
Exactly. He says it makes the memory radioactive and contagious in a good way, starting this chain reaction that releases more energy and creates new shared memories. It's like business begets more business, but for positive experiences.
So 1 + 1 can actually be more than 2.
It really can. As Perkins puts it, buying an experience doesn't just buy you the experience itself. It also buys you the sum of all the dividends that experience will bring for the rest of your life. The more you relive it, especially with others, the richer it becomes.
He shares a really touching example of this compounding, doesn't he? A personal one with his own father.
Yes, it's very poignant. Toward the very end of his father's life, when he was too frail to travel or do much, Perkins gave him this shamelessly sentimental gift.
What was it?
An iPad loaded with digitized football highlight reels from 1959. That was the year his dad played for the University of Iowa when the Hawkeyes won the Rose Bowl.
Oh, wow. How did his dad react?
His father absolutely loved it. He'd spend hours watching, laughing, crying, just reminiscing as he relived those past glories.
So even though he couldn't acquire new experiences?
He derived immense, profound enjoyment from these past memories. Perkins realized this deep truth then. You retire on your memories.
That's powerful.
It really is. When physical ability diminishes, looking back on a life filled with chosen, impactful experiences provides immense pride, joy, nostalgia. It truly becomes the currency of your later years. It's a powerful testament to the long-term value of lived moments.
So it's not just about what you do, but how those experiences build on each other, how they resonate and get shared, creating this ever richer tapestry of memories that literally sustain you later on.
Exactly. And to take this quantification idea further, Perkins suggests actually trying to put a numerical value on experiences in points.
Like scoring your life.
Sort of. Peak experiences, a major trip, a big life event might be worth many points. Small pleasures, a great meal, a quiet afternoon reading get fewer points.
And it's subjective, right? Based on what you value.
Totally subjective. Your values, your preferences. He uses gardening as an example. Some people adore it, find immense joy, high points. Others would say you'd have to pay them to garden 0 points for them.
Importantly, no negative points.
Right. If you don't enjoy something, it just doesn't contribute points. It's only about capturing the positive fulfillment.
This allows you to create a kind of fulfillment curve for your life then, mapping out your joy year by year.
Right. If you add up all your positive experience points for a given year, you get a number, which you can plot as a bar on a chart. The higher the bar, the more enjoyable and fulfilling that year was.
He shows an example of this.
Yeah, he provides a graphic showing a 7-year period where year 7 is broken down into specific high point experiences like a vacation in Europe, Christmas weekend with family, and a romantic weekend getaway.
And the idea is that you can actively shape that curve.
Exactly. The height and shape of this curve, representing your total lifetime fulfillment, can be dramatically changed by your deliberate choices about how much time and money you devote to earning versus having enjoyable experiences.
It's a literal way of seeing that life is the sum of your experiences.
And a powerful tool for visualizing where you might be, underspending on joy.
Yeah.
It brings to mind that quote from Carson the Butler in Downton Abbey.
Oh, yeah. What did Carson say?
He wisely put it, "The business of life is the acquisition of memories. In the end, that's all there is."
In the end, that's all there is.
Wow, that's a powerful thought, especially when we think about how much of our lives we spend acquiring money.
For a future that might not pan out as expected, or when we might be less able to actually enjoy it.
And this leads us straight into another critical and maybe uncomfortable truth that profoundly impacts how and when we should be spending our money. The surprising reality that the usefulness, the utility of money, actually declines as we get older.
Yeah, this one really challenges the deeply ingrained notion of the golden years of retirement, doesn't it? That vision of endless leisure and spending in our later decades.
It does. What does the data actually show?
Perkins presents compelling, detailed data suggesting people are actually not spending down their wealth effectively in retirement. In fact, often they're still accumulating it.
Still saving in retirement. Pretty much. The Federal Reserve Board's survey of consumer finances shows this striking trend. The median net worth for U.S. households headed by someone aged 45 to 54 is about $124,200.
Okay.
But for those 75 and older, the median net worth is a surprising $264,800.
Whoa, that's more than double, even for the median household.
Yep. It clearly indicates people are still accumulating wealth, sometimes significantly more, even deep into the years when you'd expect them to be actively spending it down. A strategic decumulation isn't happening for most.
And other research confirms this.
Yeah, the Employee Benefit Research Institute did a study in 2018 on older Americans' wealth, and it found retirees are very slow to spend down their assets.
How slow?
Across all ages, the median ratio of household spending to income stays around 1.1, meaning spending just tracks their declining income rather than drawing significantly from savings.
So they live on the income, not the nest egg they saved.
Largely, yes. And get this, for retirees who started retirement with $500,000 or more, they had spent down a median of only 11.8% of that money after 20 years, or by the time they died.
Only 11.8% after 2 decades. That leaves, what, over $440,000 sitting there at age 85?
Exactly. Imagine accumulating all that, working all those years, only to never really use it or enjoy it.
They're basically still in accumulation mode, mentally, even after they stop working.
It seems that way. A staggering 1/3 of all retirees in that study actually increased their assets after retirement.
Increase them.
And those on a pension with guaranteed income spent down even less, just 4% of their assets during the first 18 years of retirement.
It's crystal clear. People who thought they were saving for retirement aren't actually spending those savings. They're dying with a huge chunk left over. Definitely not dying with zero.
Dying with a surplus, a big one in many cases.
But what about healthcare? That's the big fear, right? Rising costs in old age, wiping you out.
That's the common justification for oversaving, sure, and healthcare costs undeniably rise. But the Consumer Expenditure Survey from the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows that average annual spending overall actually declines significantly with age.
Even with higher medical bills.
For households headed by 55 to 64-year-olds, average annual spending was $65,000. It fell to $55,000 for the 65-74 group, and then down to $42,000 for those 75 and older.
So spending drops by almost a third from peak earning years to 75 plus borrow.
Right, and that consistent decline happened despite increasing healthcare expenses, because most other discretionary spending, clothing, dining out, entertainment, travel drops off even more significantly.
Why? Just less desire or physical limitations?
Often physical limitations or just a natural slowing down. This pattern leads to what financial planners call the slow-go and no-go years. Physical limits, even more than money, become the main restrictions on spending and enjoyment.
Which brings us to the core concept here, the health-wealth curve. Sounds kind of grim.
It a bit grim, but Perkins insists it's a critical reality check we need to confront head-on. The concept is simple. Your ability to actually extract enjoyment from money declines as you age.
How does he illustrate that?
He uses the stark image of a deathbed scenario. Someone too weak to move, maybe needing a feeding tube, cognitive faculties fading. At that point, money, no matter how much you have, becomes nearly worthless.
Can't buy you health or ability at that point.
Right, a private jet, fine dining, luxury travel, all inaccessible. At that stage, the only person with less ability to enjoy money is, well, literally dead. It's a stark, undeniable endpoint that really informs the whole philosophy.
Okay, that's the extreme end. But how does this inevitable decline relate to us now when we're younger and healthier?
It implies that the undeniable fact of our eventual decline has profound implications for every single day of our lives, starting right now.
How so?
Perkins shares very personal, detailed examples, like playing football at 50 versus 20. The fear of injury just makes it less carefree, less fun.
Yeah, you definitely think twice about diving for a ball at 50.
Exactly. He talks about his friend Greg, an avid skier. Greg recently went for 7 days straight, something he did easily at 22, skiing bell to bell.
And now?
Now, at his current age, Greg was in so much pain afterwards, he realized 7 days was just too much. The same money for that ski trip now yields maybe 75% of the enjoyment it once did. His body just couldn't handle it the same way.
The return on investment for that experience has literally decreased because of health.
Precisely. And he tells another dramatic story about his girlfriend's 69-year-old granddad, Chris, wanting to swim just 30 yards to the famous Soggy Dollar Bar in the British Virgin Islands.
Okay, 30 yards isn't far.
For Chris, a former swim coach in his youth, it was immense. He struggled hugely, nearly collapsing from exertion when he got there. These aren't just anecdotes, they're concrete demonstrations of life's physical limits creeping in.
That's a stark, detailed reminder of how physical limits really chip away at our ability to enjoy even simple things, let alone big adventures.
It is, and medical research rigorously backs this up. Different systems in your body deteriorate in different rates, but they all deteriorate.
Bone density, muscles, vision, lungs, everything.
Everything. Bone density, muscle mass, vision, lung function, cardiac health, cognitive abilities, even our sense of smell all show an inevitable decline with age.
Can we slow it down?
Sure, the rate of decline can be influenced. Non-smokers have a much flatter lung function curve, for example. Investing in health definitely improves lifetime fulfillment and can slow the decline.
But the overall downward trend is inescapable.
Yes, as Perkins bluntly puts it, 80-year-olds are a lot less healthy than 25-year-olds. You simply will not be healthier or more physically capable at 65 than you were at 25, assuming you were normally healthy back then. The window for peak physical experiences is finite.
And he experienced this himself, made choices based on it.
Very much so. At age 50, he made a conscious, deliberate choice to go wakeboarding.
Why wakeboarding specifically?
Because he knew it was very likely a now or never activity for him. He figured he wouldn't be in good enough shape even 5 or 7 years later to truly enjoy it without significant risk or pain.
Didn't want the regret later.
Exactly. Didn't want to get to the end thinking about what he could have done when he was able. He illustrates this whole concept with a graph he calls declining utility of money with age.
What does the graph show?
It typically shows an individual's wealth rising steadily over time while their physical ability steadily declines. That widening gap between your rising wealth and your declining physical ability, that represents your increasing inability to enjoy certain experiences, even if you can easily afford them. More money doesn't automatically equal more experience points if your body and health can't keep up. That gap is lost potential joy.
Okay, this is a tough pill to swallow for many, I imagine, especially given that deep fear of running out of money, which leads to precautionary saving.
Right.
People listening must be thinking, but what about me? What if I have a catastrophic health event? Cancer, Alzheimer's, something costing millions. How does Perkins address that very real fear?
It's a very real and understandable fear, and he acknowledges it directly. People worry endlessly about unforeseen expenses, particularly those huge medical costs in old age. Cancer treatments easily hitting $500,000 a year or more.
So shouldn't we save for that possibility?
He challenges the practical effectiveness of trying to self-insure against these extreme sort of black swan costs through personal savings alone.
How does he frame it?
He likens excessive precautionary saving to buying alien robot invasion insurance.
Okay. A bit extreme, but I see the point.
While needing medical care is obviously far more likely than aliens, he argues that for most people, No amount of savings will cover the costliest healthcare you might possibly need. The numbers are just too astronomical. Trying to save enough is futile for the average person.
He gives a very personal example of this, too, with his own family, right?
Yeah, a really impactful one. He describes his own father's hospital stay, where the out-of-pocket medical expenses, despite having insurance, amounted to an astounding $50,000 per night.
$50,000 a night, out of pocket.
Per night. So he asks, very pointedly, does it really matter whether you save $10,000 or $50,000 or even $250,000?
Because even $250,000 is gone in 5 days at that rate.
Exactly. He argues that $250,000 saved diligently over many years would be completely wiped out in less than a week of that kind of intense, specialized care. For the vast majority, such costs mean it won't make any real difference whether they saved specifically for it or not.
So what happens? Who pays?
Either the government or a combination of insurance and philanthropy steps in, or, grimly, the person dies without receiving that level of care. He's not saying stiff the hospitals, but be realistic about what personal savings can actually cover in truly extreme scenarios. It's about pragmatism.
Okay, so if self-insuring for these catastrophic extreme events isn't really rational for most people, what's a more pragmatic way to manage that deep fear of running out of money, especially for long-term care needs?
He proposes long-term care insurance as a far more rational and efficient tool than trying to self-insure with massive, potentially illiquid savings.
Is that affordable?
It can often cost less than you think, especially if you start paying premiums before age 65. And it specifically addresses what is arguably the largest single financial risk for most people in old age.
Okay, so insurance for long-term care. Anything else?
He also introduces income annuities as another powerful financial product. These are designed specifically to protect against longevity risk.
Longevity risk, the risk of outliving your savings.
Exactly. He quotes Ron Lieber from the New York Times, who clarifies that annuities are more like insurance that you buy to guarantee that you won't run out of money if you live a long time.
How do they guarantee that?
Annuities work by pooling risk across millions of people, and individuals simply can't do that alone with their savings. This collective approach allows insurance companies to offer a steady, reasonable rate of return, providing guaranteed income for life, protecting you against the unknown of how long you'll actually live. It's a strategic way to mitigate a very specific, very real fear.
This whole concept of money's declining utility with age also seems to tie into what he calls a personal interest rate. Can you explain that? It sounds like it could really change how we view delaying gratification.
Absolutely. It's a direct consequence. The idea is, the older you are, the more someone should have to pay you to delay an experience. That required compensation is your personal interest rate.
And it goes up as you age.
Demonstrably. It rises with your age and the corresponding decline in your health and vitality. Let's take a scenario. You're 20, you want to take a trip to Mexico this summer. Your boss offers you X% of the trip's cost to delay a year.
Okay.
At 20, your personal interest rate is probably pretty low. You might take the deal, you'll likely have similar health next year, and the extra money might even mean 2 trips later for the price of one now. You're relatively indifferent to waiting.
But that calculation changes drastically as you get older, right?
Yeah.
The cost of delay gets much higher.
Exactly. If you're 70, the idea of waiting until you're 80 to take that Mexico trip probably holds zero appeal.
Right. Who knows if you'll even be able to go then?
Precisely. Your declining health, your diminishing physical capacity, they dictate a much, much higher personal interest rate. Even a substantial sum offered to delay might not be worth the risk of being unable to enjoy the trip at all.
So you should ask yourself the would I rather question.
Yes, for any discretionary spending. Would I rather have one such experience now or potentially 2 such experiences X years from now? If you save the money, it can grow maybe 8% a year, so $100 becomes $216 in 10 years. Theoretically enough for 2 of whatever you could buy now.
So for younger people, maybe waiting for the 2 trips makes sense sometimes.
Sometimes, yes. It depends entirely on the experience and your life stage. Some things, like a family wedding, can't be delayed. But for others, waiting might allow for a significantly better, richer version of the same experience later.
He uses the Las Vegas example for that.
Yeah, he notes that experiencing Las Vegas at 40 is much better than Las Vegas at 20, assuming you have significantly more money at 40.
Better shows, better restaurants, better seats.
Right. It's like 2 different Las Vegases. One constrained by a student budget, the other enhanced by more resources. The key insight is that while delaying can sometimes net you more life experience points later, this logic flips dramatically as you age.
The older you get, the less you should wait.
the less willing you should be to delay, even if offered more money later. Because the window of opportunity for physical and mental enjoyment is rapidly closing. Your health, not your bank balance, becomes the ultimate limiting factor.
So it really demands strategic planning, a deliberate life design, not just random spending or saving.
Yeah.
And the book introduces a great practical tool for this time bucketing.
Yes, time bucketing. It's simple but incredibly powerful for designing your life plan, turning abstract desires into concrete, actionable steps.
How does it work? You draw a timeline.
Literally, draw a timeline of your life from now until, well, the end. Divide it into manageable 5 or 10-year intervals, creating distinct time buckets.
Okay. Then what?
Then, the crucial first step. Fill these buckets with all the key experiences, activities, events, skills you want to learn that you definitely want to have during your lifetime. And importantly, do this without worrying about the money first.
Just get the dreams down on paper, allocated to time periods.
Exactly. This becomes your unique, personalized list, far more intentional than just a generic bucket list.
So it's not just a wish list, it's mapping desires across your finite lifespan. Consciously allocating time for joy.
Precisely. You take your desired pursuits and deliberately drop them into specific time buckets based on when you'd ideally have that experience, considering energy levels, life stages, physical demands.
Like planning out those 50 ski days you mentioned.
Right. You map out which decades or 5-year intervals you'd aim for those ski days, and naturally the most physically demanding activities.
Hiking Machu Picchu.
That probably clusters on the earlier side, maybe in the 25, 30 years old bucket, because that's when your body is most capable.
Whereas Cruise Alaska might be in the 75-plus bucket.
Exactly. Or learning to paint. Things that are less physically demanding might appear later. This exercise visually highlights where your physical capabilities best align with your aspirations over time.
This kind of detailed planning also brings into sharp focus something he calls mini-deaths. That's a really evocative phrase.
It's profound and, yeah, a bit sobering. Perkins explains that we all die a multitude of deaths throughout our lives.
Not literal deaths.
No. The inevitable ends of certain life stages, opportunities, or relationships that we often don't even notice passing at the time.
Like what?
He uses this poignant, incredibly relatable example of his younger daughter, at age 10, suddenly losing interest in watching Pooh's Heffalump movie with him anymore.
Oh.
He reflects that if he'd known that specific time was the last time they'd share that simple pleasure, he would have watched it with such profound intentionality, savored every second.
You don't realize it's the last time until it's long past.
Exactly. Other examples. The last time you played with childhood friends with complete abandon. The last meaningful conversation with a beloved professor before they passed. Unlike school years or vacations, the endpoints of most life periods just come and go without fanfare, only recognized in retrospect.
And his analogy of the resort swimming pools really drives this home, right? About moving through life stages with specific windows of opportunity.
It really does. Imagine a resort with different pools for different ages and activities. A wading pool for toddlers, a thrilling water slide for teens, an adults-only pool, a lap pool, a seniors pool for gentle exercise.
Each with its own rules for entry.
Right. You can only access each pool if you meet its specific rules age, physical ability. If you don't use that water slide in your teens, you can't just go back later when you're 40. That opportunity is past.
Some experiences just can't be delayed indefinitely.
Exactly. You can maybe transfer some from your 20s to your 30s, but it's limited by your body. Many people mistakenly act as if they'll have access to the kiddie pool and teen pool their whole lives.
And then suddenly find themselves restricted to the senior pool.
And wondering how they got there, mourning the missed opportunities of their youth. It's a powerful visual for our finite capabilities in different life phases.
This kind of deliberate planning, accepting these mini-deaths, seems directly linked to trying to live a life without regret.
It is, absolutely. Perkins explicitly connects it to Bronnie Ware's famous book, The Top 5 Regrets of Dying.
What was the top regret, especially for men?
I wish I had not worked so hard. That hits right at the core of this problem, constantly grinding on what Perkins calls the treadmill of a work existence.
And consequently missing out. Missing a child's irreplaceable youth, a partner's companionship during their prime, that window for an adventurous trip.
Right. He also cites this compelling experiment with college freshmen. One group was asked to imagine moving away in 30 days and to consciously plan to savor their remaining time on campus.
What happened?
That group reported being significantly happier and more satisfied with their time by the end of the month compared to a control group. Deliberately thinking about limited time actually increases savoring and enjoyment. It forces an appreciation of the present.
So the goal is regret-free living through intention and awareness of finite time. And a huge part of that strategy is knowing your net worth peak. This isn't just about hitting a certain dollar figure, is it?
No, not at all. Your net worth peak is defined as that one special point in your life when your net worth is the highest it will ever be. And crucially, he emphasizes it's a date, not just a number. It represents a specific point in time.
Why is identifying that date so important?
Because the overarching goal, remember, is to die with zero. If your net worth keeps climbing into your 60s, 70s, 80s...
Then you're not maximizing your experience points. You're oversaving.
Exactly. You're not on track to die with zero. At some point, you must start strategically spending down your lifetime savings on experiences while you still have the maximum health and ability to enjoy them.
At that point, the apex of your financial and physical capability to enjoy, that's the peak date.
That's the idea, the peak where your financial resources and your ability to use them optimally intersect.
And he stresses this peak shouldn't be left to chance. He talks about his own big 45th birthday party as a very deliberate example of peak experience spending.
Yeah, he describes the St. Bart's party in great detail. He calls it the party of a lifetime.
Why age 45 specifically?
He chose 45 very intentionally. His mom was getting older. His friends weren't getting any younger. He wanted everyone to be physically able to attend and fully enjoy the whole celebration. He was determined to create this significant, unique, shared memory dividend.
What did he do? Sounds elaborate.
It was. He rented out the entire secluded beachfront Hotel Tijuana, all 22 rooms, plus rooms at the nearby Cheval Blanc. He meticulously paid for flights for dozens of guests, arranged lavish boat trips, gourmet picnics, nightly food and entertainment.
Like what kind of entertainment?
Sushi and karaoke night, old school R&B bands. Every detail was planned for maximum collective enjoyment, maximum experience points for everyone.
But the real highlight, the thing that makes the story resonate, sounds like the surprise guest he brought in.
It was. He flew in Natalie Merchant.
The singer. Wow.
Yeah. Her 1995 solo debut, Tiger Lily, was an album he loved back in his 20s when he was just starting out in New York. He knew her mellow, lyrical style would set the perfect mood for one special evening and would be a hit with everyone, from his mom to his childhood buddies.
What was that moment like for him?
He recounts holding his wife, listening to Merchant tell the story behind a song, sipping champagne, seeing his mom chatting with the singer. It was a pleasure, he says, and he'd never change anything about that trip.
He paints a picture of just soaking it in.
Totally. He remembers walking down to the beach, seeing all his loved ones just in awe of the beauty, feeling like this might just be what heaven looks like. He says the whole week was awesome in every way, and I'll never forget it, not until my brain stops working.
That's an incredibly vivid, almost palpable justification for strategic, deliberate, peak spending when you have the health and capacity to truly enjoy it with the people you love most.
It really is a powerful argument for front-loading joy.
But I imagine many people listening, even after hearing that, might still be worrying very practically about, not having enough to live on, especially if they spend down earlier. How does he counter that fundamental survival fear?
He addresses this directly and again with specific numbers. He defines a survival threshold.
The bare minimum you need just to survive.
Exactly. The absolute minimum amount of money you need saved up just to cover basic survival costs without any other income. He calculates this for a hypothetical 55-year-old expecting to live to 80.
How much does he figure that is?
He estimates an annual cost of survival at around $12,000. Simple multiplication for 25 years would suggest $300,000 is needed.
Okay, $300 case sounds like a lot to many people.
Right, but then he explains a crucial detail. Your nest egg earns interest, even conservatively. With a modest 3% real interest rate above inflation, you'd only need approximately $212,000 saved at age 55 to generate that $12,000 a year for 25 years.
So the power of compounding means the actual lump sum needed is lower than you might think.
Significantly lower. Yeah. And this $212K is the absolute minimum survival number in his example. It's often much lower than what dutiful, fear-driven savers actually accumulate. His point is, once you meet this specific threshold, you technically don't need to work for money anymore. You can start carefully and strategically dipping into savings to enhance your current life experiences.
And what factors influence when your specific optimal net worth peak occurs? Is it the same for everyone, that 45-60 range?
Not at all. It's highly individualized. Your earnings growth trajectory and your personal health are the key determinants.
How so?
Someone with rapid earnings growth, like a tech founder or a successful trader like Perkins himself, will likely hit their financial peak earlier because they accumulate wealth so quickly.
Makes sense.
Conversely, someone who enjoys exceptional health and maintains high energy levels well into their later years generally has a later optimal peak, simply because they have more years in which they can robustly enjoy experiences that cost money.
For health extends the enjoyment window.
Right. But overall, his simulation suggests that for most people, the optimal net worth peak, that sweet spot where financial assets intersect peak physical ability to enjoy them, does tend to fall somewhere between ages 45 and 60.
And beyond that minimum survival threshold number, focusing on just getting a bigger and bigger retirement number is misguided.
He argues strongly against obsessively focusing on a specific, ever-growing dollar amount, because more money doesn't automatically equal more experience points. For every additional year you spend working just to accumulate more, you sacrifice invaluable free time now, and your health continues its inevitable decline.
You're trading away your most capable years for dollars you might not be able to fully use later.
Precisely. A bad trade-off, in his view.
So he's really challenging those traditional retirement ages, 62, 65, 70, that are so ingrained from things like Social Security and Medicare.
Yes. While those eligibility ages certainly influence when many people actually retire, the most common age in the U.S. is 62, often triggered by job loss or illness. Perkins argues that for most people, their optimal peak is significantly earlier.
So waiting until 62 or 65 is probably too late, according to this.
If you wait until 62 or 65 to start strategically spending down your nest egg, he believes you will almost certainly end up working longer than necessary for money you will never get to spend or fully enjoy.
He shows this visually too, right? Optimal versus traditional spending.
Yeah, he has a conceptual graph comparing optimal spending to traditional spending. The optimal curve peaks earlier and higher, usually in one's middle years, reflecting that conscious decision to front-load experiences. It explicitly acknowledges that spending naturally declines in old age due to health, rather than unrealistically assuming you'll spend just as much at 80 as you did at 50.
This all really boils down to a powerful call to action. Be bold, but not foolish. It sounds like he's encouraging calculated risks, especially when we're younger.
Exactly. He introduces the concept of asymmetric risk, which is a really useful strategic framework for decision-making.
Asymmetric risk. What's that?
It's when the potential upside of success is much, much greater than the potential downside of failure. When you face a situation like that, it makes absolute rational sense to be bold, even to take significant leaps.
Can you give an example?
He uses the compelling story of Mark Cuban, the Dallas Mavericks owner, Shark Tank investor. His entrepreneurial journey started incredibly young.
Selling trash bags at 12.
Yep, trash bags at 12, stamps at 16, ran a campus pub, got fired from a software store, eventually started Micro Solutions, which made him a millionaire. Cuban famously said, with raw honesty, "I had nothing, so I had nothing to lose, right? It was all about going for it."
That nothing-to-lose mindset Mark Cuban had. It's incredibly powerful, but maybe daunting for most of us to embrace. How does Perkins suggest we tap into that boldness, even if we're not starting from absolute zero?
Perkins reinforces this by stating a clear principle. The younger you are, the bolder you should be.
Applies to careers, finances.
Yes, but also physical risks. He recalls jumping off his garage roof as a kid, felt like no big deal at 20, but would be utterly foolish at 50 with a heavier body and less resilient knees.
Right. Recovery time is different.
Exactly. When you're young, the potential upside of risks pursuing a passion, starting a business, moving for an opportunity is huge. And the downside is surprisingly low because you have so much time to recover, adapt, learn, and earn more money later if needed.
Like in poker, you can reload.
That's his analogy. You can reload and reload and reload in the game of life when you're young. Your youth itself is your greatest safety net.
He even experienced this reloading personally in his career, didn't he? The time he got fired.
He did. At 23, he was fired from his job as a junior trader, and it was for something seemingly minor, resting his head in the trading booth, seen as being tired or lazy.
Ouch. How did he feel?
Scared, uncertain about his future, naturally. But he quickly realized he could correct course. Even if he hadn't found another job immediately, he wasn't gonna, starve or end up homeless. His downside was limited.
So what did he do?
He took a broker job, Wasn't his dream, but it was a concrete step forward. He emphasizes that the temporary loss was worth it because he had so little to lose financially, plenty of time to course correct, and even that negative experience ultimately yielded positive memory dividends and valuable lessons learned.
This principle applies broadly then, even to big career choices like trying to become an actor. The timing is everything.
Yes, he advises someone in their early 20s to absolutely go for it, exhaust themselves trying to make it as an actor. Because if it doesn't work out after a few years,
They can pivot easily.
right, they can readily go back to an office job, learn a trade, apply those skills elsewhere. The opportunity cost and the downside are relatively low.
But moving to Hollywood in your 50s to chase that dream.
A very different proposition, he warns. At that age, you likely have dependents, spouse, kids, maybe aging parents. Your potential failure impacts others significantly. The stakes are much higher.
He changed his own risk tolerance based on dependence, right?
Exactly. He personally stopped riding motorcycles and taking flying lessons after having kids. He no longer felt he had the right to put his life on the line just for thrills when others relied on him. And even for someone without dependence, the risk-reward balance shifts when older because you simply have fewer years left to enjoy any potential success from a big risk.
He also tells the story of Christine, right? Someone young, miserable in her job, but scared to quit.
Yeah, Christine was selling plastic countertops, utterly miserable, but she was paralyzed by the fear of quitting without another job lined up, convinced it would be impossible to find something else.
What did Perkins tell her?
He gently persuaded her that at 25, she was young enough, adaptable enough to take that risk. He basically said, what's the worst that can happen? You wait tables for a bit. The worst case was far from catastrophic.
Her perceived downside was way bigger than the reality.
Exactly, so she quit. And yeah, she stumbled a bit, even briefly took another high-paying job she hated, but she ultimately recovered and found a much better path. The powerful point is that youth provides this immense capacity to take risks, learn from failures, and recover, accumulating invaluable experience points along the way.
He suggests a really practical way to deal with these fears around big decisions too, the quantify the fear method, like for moving for a job.
It's a great actionable technique. Let's say you get an exciting job offer across the country, pays $70,000 more a year, but you're terrified of losing touch with friends and family.
Okay, common scenario.
He says quantify that fear. First, ask yourself honestly, how much time do I actually spend with these specific people now? Often it's less than we think because we take proximity for granted.
Good point. Then what?
Then ask, how much is a round-trip first-class ticket from the new city back home on zero notice for a spontaneous visit? Find the highest possible price.
Okay.
Compare that maximum travel cost to your potential $70,000 salary gain. Even if someone still decides to stay put, they're now making a conscious choice. They're effectively choosing to pay $70,000 a year in foregone income for the comfort and convenience of not moving.
It shifts it from a vague emotional fear to a calculated eyes-open trade-off.
Exactly. It helps you make a rational decision, not just an emotional one.
And he applied this kind of detailed quantifying logic himself when he moved to Texas for that trading job, right? Even though others thought it was crazy.
He did. He was a successful broker in New York. An unexpected interview during a routine client visit in Texas led to a surprise offer. Head options trader at a firm there.
And people questioned it.
Oh, yeah. Friends, colleagues were like, why leave a cushy New York job for a riskier one in Texas? Considering stereotypes back then, too. But Perkins was thinking, where are my bags?
He saw the asymmetric risk. Huge upside.
Totally. He had a clear personal interest rate calculation. He'd moved to Siberia for the chance to be a trader and knew he'd hate himself forever if he didn't try, if it failed. Worst case, he could always go back to being a broker. The downside was limited.
And it worked out. He liked Texas.
Succeeded professionally, came to genuinely love Texas, co-owned a horse, acquired a shotgun, embraced the whole thing. Even experiences that might seem negative or challenging at first can yield profound positive memory dividends later, especially when the upside is high and the downside contained. They shape you in unexpected ways.
He guessed that his own experiences, the scale of his risks, might seem out of reach for some. But the logic applies regardless of scale.
Precisely. He stresses that. Whether it's someone leaving a six-figure job or someone working at Burger King, taking night classes for computer programming, or starting a food truck on the side, it's about being bold within your own context.
Choosing the potentially more rewarding path over the safer path of quiet misery.
Exactly. He contrasts those two paths. And he addresses that deep-seated risk aversion many people have, acknowledging his own mom and grandma. They prioritize safety above all else, shaped by the Great Depression.
His mom worried about him losing his first million.
She did. Even when he was clearly successful, she couldn't shake that ingrained fear of financial loss.
And he makes that crucial, often overlooked point about the risk of inaction. That staying put also carries risk.
This is absolutely key. Staying safe might feel secure, but it carries a significant hidden cost. The life you could have lived if you had mustered the courage to be bolder.
He quantifies that too.
He does.
Yeah.
He puts it in terms of experience points. Avoiding certain risks might mean getting, say, 7,000 points instead of the 10,000 you could have had, leading to a life that's potentially 30% less fulfilling or vibrant.
Some might consciously accept that trade-off for peace of mind.
Maybe. But he wants people to be acutely aware of the full long-term consequences of those choices, the opportunity cost of playing it too safe. He advises against letting irrational fears dictate major life choices.
Because the worst-case scenarios are often not as bad as we imagine.
Right. Due to safety nets, unemployment, family support, just our own resilience. The true financial downside is often surprisingly limited, but the potential upside in terms of life experience and fulfillment can be infinite.
Okay, so we've taken this deep dive into Die with Zero. We've explored the provocative title, the very personal stories behind it, the surprising facts about wealth and spending, and that really powerful idea of experiences and their memory dividends.
Yeah, and we've seen how Perkins really challenges conventional wisdom, showing our golden years for maximizing fulfillment might actually be much earlier than traditional retirement, and how the utility of money itself declines with age.
The concepts of time bucketing, knowing your net worth peak, they're not just dry financial strategies, are they? They're more like practical blueprints for designing a deliberately lived, optimized life.
Absolutely. Blueprints for maximizing joy and minimizing regret.
And that emphasis on being bold, especially when young, with less to lose, rather than letting irrational fears run the show, that's a powerful call to action. But the true mission here, the real point of Die with Zero, it isn't literally about hitting $0 and 0 cents at the exact moment of death, right? He admits that's basically impossible.
Right. It's not about mathematical precision. He readily admits hitting exactly zero is an impossible task. It's about the direction, the intention.
So what is the actual purpose of setting that goal?
The purpose of the Die with Zero goal is to jar you, as he says. To jar you into rethinking the standard conventional approaches to life that so often lead to regret later on.
It's meant to shift your focus.
Fundamentally shift your autopilot focus from simply earning and saving and endlessly maximizing your wealth to living the best life you possibly can, starting right now.
Living to the fullest, chasing memorable experiences.
And crucially, timing those experiences with your health and free time, making sure you're actually capable of fully enjoying them when you have them.
And it's also a constant reminder, woven throughout, to continually invest in your health, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because that's maybe the single biggest multiplier for lifetime fulfillment.
Arguably, yes. Your health directly impacts how many of those experience points you can actually rack up and truly enjoy over your lifespan.
This whole approach, it really pushes you to actively engage with your one precious life, to be the deliberate architect of your own joy.
Rather than just passively accumulating for a distant, potentially less capable future self that might never arrive or might not be able to enjoy the fruits of your labor, it's about being present, being bold, and valuing experiences over accumulation.
So as you, listening, reflect on everything we've discussed today, that surprising truth about money's declining utility, the compounding power of memory dividends, the urgency of capturing experiences while you're most able. Here's a final thought to mull over. What specific peak experience from your own time buckets are you willing to bring forward and prioritize maybe in the next year? What's one bold, intentional step you'll take, ensuring you don't unnecessarily work for free today for a future self that may never fully enjoy it?